Hi there and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelos in Ottawa on this Tuesday. Tonight, Minister on the defense.
You don't seem to have confidence in this program. Why not? And is it appropriate to stay on as Public Safety Minister?
I have absolute confidence in this program.
Can Public Safety Minister Anandasangaree lead a gun buyback program after leaked audio reveals him casting doubt on the very plan he's in charge of running? We're going to ask the minister himself in moments. Then, what's in it for New Brunswick? Premier Susan Holt is here in town lobbying federal ministers after New Brunswick was left off of the federal government's first list of major projects, getting the approval fast-tracked. She'll join me in studio coming up on the program. Plus, late-night truce.
I'm so happy for them. Plus, now that Jimmy's not being canceled, I get to enjoy this again.
U.S. comedian Jimmy Kimmel is headed back on air tonight after finding himself booted from airwaves over comments that angered Donald Trump supporters. Our front bench will dig into the free speech debate launched by the late-night saga. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone will be here a little bit later on in the show. First, though, Public Safety Minister Anandasangaree is on the defense as he tried to promote some movement on the Liberal government's long-promised buyback program for assault-style weapons banned during the Trudeau government. Following a business buyback pilot, the feds are launching a pilot program for individuals in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. The small-scale pilot program starts today and lasts 6 weeks. After that, eligible firearm owners across the country will have a chance to declare their prohibited firearms in order to be eligible for compensation. Then the actual national collection program is supposed to start in early 2026. But the announcement was overshadowed by pressure on Public Safety Minister Anandasangaree, who found himself in hot water when the Toronto Star obtained an audio recording of the minister saying he doubted police would have the resources to enforce a buyback program and intimating Prime Minister Carney is pushing forward on the program to appease voters in Quebec. Now the opposition is calling for the minister to be fired. Hi, Minister Anandasangaree. Great to have you back in studio. Thank you very much for making the time.
Glad to be back.
If you'll permit me, I'm going to start very bluntly. Why aren't you resigning?
Well, first of all, we introduced, as you know, the assault-style firearm compensation program today. It's a mandate that was given to me by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister received a mandate to execute on this program as part of the election that took place in April. I'm implementing the program. As we were contemplating the launch, we knew there are a number of things will come our way to both obstruct as well as derail this announcement. And that's what happened last Sunday, as you're aware. But I'm absolutely resolved to implement and bring forward this program to Canadians.
I take your characterization as, what happened, the aim of it being to obstruct, and certainly the leak came from an organization that doesn't want to see this go ahead. But you have not refuted the content of what was leaked, and that's why I asked you about whether or not you're going to resign. And I'll ask more specifically what informs that question. You told the individual in that conversation that you can't explain the logic of the buyback program. If the Public Safety Minister in charge of implementing the program can't explain its justification, why should Canadians accept one?
So this is a conversation that took, it was a 20-minute conversation, 20 minutes or so conversation. It was recorded without my knowledge. Notwithstanding that, much of the conversation were part of previous conversations I've had with this individual. The logic of this, I know he does not accept. I have tried to explain this in the past. We have not been able to agree on it, so that's why I dismissed it as such. I believe in the program. I ran on this program when I ran to be an MP. A couple of things there were completely, where I was misguided. There was two times at one point I said I will bail him out, and another time I said I will compensate him. Obviously they're in just in a private conversation, not to be taken at face value.
But you're a minister. With all due respect, you're a minister of the Crown who is in charge of the public safety of this country. Why would you make light of a program you know is fraught with controversy?
Actually, this is a 20-minute conversation I had with someone I've known for many years. I'm sure if you were recorded in a private conversation, there may be things that you would have said, or things, the way you say it, that may be different than in a public setting. I fundamentally believe in this program. I've always believed in this program. That's why, in fact, directly when the conversation was started because I wanted to advise him of what the program going ahead. It wasn't about saying I don't believe in it. It was about saying we're going ahead. These are the elements of it. And look, I think the bigger issue here is the program is launched. And it is launched with a pilot in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and we look forward to expanding it across Canada.
Believe me, I have many questions about the launch of the program and the effectiveness or lack thereof of it. But when you say, when you kind of try to diminish the significance of what you said, and I understand it's a longer conversation, I understand it wasn't recorded with your permission, but the bottom line is your comments are out there now in public discourse, in the public domain, and these are Canadians as a whole, in the aggregate, who are looking to you as the Minister of Public Safety to ensure their own public safety. The things you do, I think they should be trusting of the fact that they are with the intent to be in the public in the name of public safety. You also reference in this conversation political implications. Quebec is in a different place than other parts of Canada, right? And this is something that is very much a big deal for many of the Quebec electorate that voted for us. You also go on to say that you would have a, quote, very different approach. Yeah. What about those comments would imbue a sense of confidence among Canadians in this program when you yourself, Minister, don't appear to have it?
So let's talk about Quebec for a second. So in Quebec, we've had three major incidents involving firearms. So we had the major one, of course, being L'École Polytechnique. Then we had very recently the Quebec City mosque shooting, and then we had Dawson. So these are many instances where Quebecers have a heightened sense of gun violence, and they've been deeply impacted by it. If you look at polling, for example, last year, 80% of Quebecers support this, 70% of rural Quebecers support this program. This is very much an important issue for many of our caucus members, including, of course, Natalie Prevost, who is a survivor of the L'École Polytechnique. So in that context, Quebec is an important part of it, but it's not just Quebec.
Are they more important, though, than the 70% of Albertans and Saskatchewans who don't support the program? Just because you have more MPs there?
There's those on the Danforth, as you know, the shooting on the Danforth that happened several years ago. We've had a number of incidents, for example, the Mass Casualty Commission in Nova Scotia. That's precisely why we're doing this in Nova Scotia, the pilot. What's clear is that this is an important issue for Canadians. I reference Quebec because there's particular history in Quebec with gun violence that I wanted to highlight. And we are here today ready to launch the national program within the next several weeks.
Are you worried about the impact, though, in Quebec because you have so many MPs there, because it's been so key to your electoral gains in the last election? And are you not worried about the public opinion polling in Alberta and Saskatchewan because you don't have representation there? And is this then as crass a political move as a policy one?
This is not a crass political move at all. This is a move to ensure that their safety of Canadians are paramount. We have an issue with gun violence right now. We see it on our streets. We see it across the country. It's not, Alberta or Saskatchewan are not immune from it. At this moment, there's multiple prongs of responses that we need. One, this is one of several responses the government have, which is about ensuring that AR-15s, for example, are off our communities, outside of our communities. People are compensated for their return. We also have criminal justice reform that Minister Fraser is working on. As you know, bail reform is something that he will be introducing in the next several weeks, as well as other criminal justice reforms. This is complemented by the $1.3 billion investment at our borders that we did last December, along with 1,000 new RCMP and CBSA officers that we're working on.
How many have
recruitment.
been hired?
Well, right now, the actual, we're waiting for the budget decision, first of all. But we are in the process. So Depot, for example, in Regina, are working on the training program to enhance and to ensure that the 1,000 that are going to go through the system can be trained, and we have capacity to do the training. So the prep work is happening, and as soon as the budget is finalized, we will be rolling this out.
It's been months, to be fair, since your government promised that they would do that. On the effectiveness of the program, because I want to ask about the policy itself. How can you assure Canadians it will be effective in combating increases, as you point to, in gun violence? Every police, any individual representing police that we've spoken to has pointed to the border as the primary, point of concern when it comes to obtaining weapons that are used in gun crimes, that the majority in their assessment of the ones that are used are not legally owned. You have the OPP saying, we're not going to enforce this program. Enforcement is something you even referenced in that leaked phone call. You have Alberta and Saskatchewan saying that they're going to put up roadblocks to the enforcement of the program. What evidence do you have to tell Canadians tonight that this program will be effective?
Actually, there are roughly 180,000 prohibited weapons in people's homes, people's businesses, people's storage. They are licensed gun owners. They have had it. We have prohibited 2,500 of these items, models and makes, since 2020. We've had 3 separate orders and councils totaling 2,500 makes and models. What we expect is that AR-15s, for example, there's roughly about between 80 to 90,000 AR-15s that are out in the community. We anticipate people will be taking advantage of this program, get compensation for returning the item or deactivating it to ensure that it cannot be used. What we do want to, this is,
but if that, with respect, Minister,
as I said,
if that isn't the crux of the problem, if the crux of the problem is illegally obtained weapons coming in from the U.S., why isn't the priority placed on actually hiring the people at the border that you said months ago that you would hire? Why isn't the priority on making sure $750 million that you will allot to this program is effectively spent and that police forces are going to enforce it? We have none of those assurances at this moment.
So let me start with the dollars involved in this program. So this was all previously budgeted. So this was all part of several budget cycles, including budget.
It's great. It's all taxpayer money. It's all our money.
Well, it is already budgeted. It's been, the commitment was made, so we're implementing it. In terms of where the effectiveness of the program is, this is one of several actions we're taking. So on the $1.3 billion we have put towards borders, those funds have already, much of it has already been spent in terms of new technology, in terms of making sure that we have Black Hawk helicopters, we have additional scanning devices. I've been across the border, to many borders this summer, and I've seen those dollars at work. The hiring of the RCMP and CBSA officers, it was a commitment we made at the April election. As you know, it takes time for the money to be
actually, even prior to that, under Prime Minister Trudeau, there was a promise to do so. I know you weren't the minister at the time, but that existed at the time.
So we will be implementing it. We're waiting for the budget decision. But these are, and we are bringing forward criminal justice reform. So it is a multi-pronged approach. This is one of several things that we need to do. It's not a binary choice of doing one or the other. It's about doing multiple things, and frankly, to put whatever we can on the table to ensure that guns are off our streets.
But what if whatever you can isn't the most effective approach? And again, you may say that the money is already allotted. $750 million of taxpayer money is not something to hope is effective, right? I think Canadians rightly would think, you know, this for sure has to be effective. Now they have police forces who aren't sure or have rejected the idea of enforcing it, and they have the minister in charge of actually implementing the program in a leaked conversation, casting doubt on whether or not it should even go forward, and saying that he would himself pursue a different approach.
I mean, with great respect, I did not say it shouldn't go forward. I did say that I would have done it differently, which is contextually very different.
Is it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When I say something, when there is a program that I'm implementing that, you know, has been in the works for 5 years, and I'm at the tail end of implementing it, then
it's been promised for 5 years. It's barely been in the works. This is only the second pilot.
Well, there's been a number of there's been a number of attempts, and I'm implementing it. I'm tasked to implement it, and what I've said was I would have done it differently, right? I would not have.
But isn't that enough to cast out for Canadians who are wondering, is my money going to be spent?
Vashi, you have a different approach to journalism than another colleague who may be doing the exact same role. I have a different approach to the way I engage and I do programs than another minister who would have done this separately. It doesn't mean that either one of us is right or wrong. It is, all I'm saying is that I probably would have done differently. I would have done primarily on the timing of it. I would not have left it continue for 5 years. I probably would have had it done a lot earlier. There was some confusion, as you know, as we did the 3 orders in council. There was confusion, there's frustration, there's distrust, and one of the things that I would have liked to avoid is bringing legitimate, hunters, legitimate people who own, law-abiding people who own firearms, as part of the conversation. And I think that would have helped us when we reached this moment. And that is the context in which I said this. The conversation I had was with the anticipation that we're going ahead with the program. It was not to cast doubt on how we're going to proceed.
But can you understand, and I take your point on the sort of the view through which you're looking at this. Can you understand, though, who Canadians who have watched this drag out for 5 years when you were not in charge of the portfolio, who have wondered about whether it is or is not going to be effective, would hear what you said and not see that as a ringing endorsement of the program going forward and be worried that the government is spending valuable resources and time on something that ultimately even the minister isn't 100% sure will be totally effective? Why not as a government? If you're governing, abandon it and move on.
Again, I have not said it won't be effective. I've said I would have done it differently, right? I think, like, I don't want to be, stuck on wording, but I did not say this wouldn't be effective. I do believe in it. I presented this.
You really think it's going to be effective, even though, as you concede, you haven't brought along gun owners.
Listen,
it hasn't been done over 5 years.
It is an effective tool. It is an important tool. It is one of several tools, and I think it's important to recognize that.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister, a real pleasure. I appreciate you taking the questions.
I'm sure we'll continue the conversation.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangaree. We've got to unpack what you heard from him there and the pressure on the federal government, on the Prime Minister, I should say, from the Conservatives to, quote unquote, fire the minister. Our front bench is here on the other side of a quick break. We've got Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone. There they are. They'll be with me in just 2 minutes. Stick around.
On Monday, a minister says that his program won't work. On Tuesday, he says he's going ahead with the program. When will the Prime Minister fire this minister?
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. If Grandpa Joe is using AR-15s to go hunting, I think we have to have a much more serious conversation about hunting. If the Leader of the Opposition wants to have a real conversation about crime, he also has to have a real conversation about guns, Mr. Speaker.
That minister did have a real conversation about guns. He was caught on tape admitting that his program won't work.
We will continue to make smart criminal justice reforms to ensure that criminals are off our streets.
That's Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangaree getting grilled in question period in the House of Commons today. While he wanted the next phase of the federal government's gun buyback program to be front and center following today's announcement, much of the focus, as you heard there, was on leaked audio of him in which he reveals his feelings about the program. Now, the Conservatives, as a consequence, as you heard there, are calling on the Prime Minister to fire Anandasangaree. Where does this all go from here? Let's bring in our front bench to talk about that. With me here in studio, former senior advisor to the Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. Dan Moulton is here. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Next to him, Kathleen Monk is the former director of communications to the late Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk and Associates. And with us remotely, Larissa Waller is the founder of Hanley Strategies. She's a former head of communications for Ontario's Conservative Premier, Doug Ford. And Laura Stone rounds us out tonight. She's a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Ladies, we wish you were also here in studio. Good to see everybody. Dan, I'll start with you. Is this leaked audio a fatal blow for this minister?
No, I don't think so. What I would say is he's handling this crisis relatively well. This is obviously an embarrassing moment for him, and it's unfortunate it happened. He fully acknowledges that and has said we all have conversations that we wouldn't want recorded and released without our knowledge. And I think he is handling it as directly and as hands-on as he can. He's standing up in question period. He's taking the blows. He's here in your studio taking the tough questions on a day that he didn't have to be. So I think he deserves some credit for keeping his chin up and moving forward with this. The reality is I think we're still having the debate on the policy that we would be having whether or not this leaked audio existed or not. This was the fight that the Liberals knew they were going to be in with the Conservatives. And I think politically it's a fight that they want, right? Like they promised to bring forward this program, and they are bringing forward this program because it resonates with their voters and it resonates in important parts of this country for the Liberals politically, right? Like we are talking about that. We're acknowledging that the importance of this program in Quebec, the support that it has in Quebec, is a really strong political element to this conversation, and I don't think we should ignore that. This is the debate we were going to be having otherwise, and it's the debate the Liberals want to be having.
I think Dan's point is really well taken, Kathleen, that this is and we've seen evidence of this over the past number of years, right? This is a debate that the Liberals don't mind having because of the way in which their constituency of voters feels. My one caveat to that would be I'm not sure they want their own minister in the middle, in the middle of it, or conceding any territory to the other side. And I say that only because I looked today for all the reaction, and there were quite a few people, for example, associated with the terrible Danforth shooting, who were expressing disappointment at the way in which the comments came through from that leaked recording. So in that vein, I wonder if there's a bit of vulnerability.
Yeah, but then conversely, you saw Natalie Provost stand right beside him, a victim of the massacre. You saw Polly Souvent put out press releases in support of the action, in fact, encouraging greater steps upon the government. I think in situations like this, when a cabinet minister gets in trouble, leaked comments or things get spilt. I remember Andy Scott, who was on a plane. He was Solicitor General at the time. He made some inappropriate comments about an APEC investigation in the RCMP. He didn't resign right away, but eventually the calls for his resignation led to his resignation. But similarly, you just had Lisa Raitt on your panel just the other day, and she, told the story of her own time that she had to offer her resignation to Prime Minister Harper because of her inappropriate comments, and he refused it, and she stood on. She stood on to fight. And I think what Dan was pointing to was a little bit of a different tenor or stance of the Liberal government today. They've been accused for the last couple of weeks of really not getting their message together, not really coming out fighting, not being on that offensive tone. And frankly, 90% of the questions in question period today were calling for the Minister of Public Safety's resignation. And he took about 50% of them. But we also saw a lot of his other caucus members stand up, like Buckley Boulanger, who was a great spokesperson in the House, a Northern Saskatchewan Indigenous man who took on that rural Canadian identity and spoke to the issue about why this gun ban and replacement needs to come into place. And so, I don't know, I kind of saw a little fight in them today. But I agree with you that the headline is absolutely horrible, and to come out so strategically on the day before the launch, I mean, a coup to the folks who, on the other side of this debate, who put that out and really tried to kind of torpedo it the get-go.
Well, the anti-gun lobby.
The anti-gun lobby.
This is directly related to that group's efforts to try and stop this.
Okay, Larissa, let me get your take on how this is unfolded and where you think it goes.
I have so much to say about this in so little time. First, to Kathleen's point about equating this to Lisa Raitt's inappropriate comments. These aren't inappropriate comments. This is an admission that a hallmark policy of this government is flawed. It's a solution that doesn't actually even remotely address the problem of crime. And the minister is desperate for Canadians to think that everybody's wandering around with an AR-15. It could have been a drinking game, sincerely, of how many times he said AR-15, that he wants everyone to think, they're everywhere. Oh my God, I'm going to be so scared. We have a crime problem. We have a bail problem. We have an illegal gun problem. We have a leaky border problem. None of this addresses that. And it's so much money spent on a policy that won't fix the actual problem. And he himself, and Dan just did it again, admitted that this is about politics in specific regions. So do a carve out in Quebec. Bring this policy out in Quebec. We do so many other carve outs for Quebec. But don't impose it across the country. It's a waste of money. And calling for the minister's resignation, sure, he should resign, right? Like he was sloppy. He wasn't careful with his words. But really, he was honest. And I think honestly, Conservatives should just call for more ministers to be honest about this god-awful policy.
Laura, your thoughts on my sense is, based on what we can glean from the leak, and based on the positioning of the government so far, that this program was already so far in the works, and not just, as I pointed out to the minister, it's been announced 5 years ago, not a lot accomplished, but so far down the line that basically they came to the conclusion, we've just got to get it done, and we're going to, combine it with other things that address the stuff that Larissa is talking about, which may in fact be a bigger part of the problem. But I think the political cost, as crass as it is, to backing down from this among their constituency of voters was too great. That's right.
Yes, and they may have been able to kind of get away with that had that audio not leaked. I think that does sort of expose some of the hypocrisy that is at the source of this controversy. Kudos to the minister for appearing on your program and trying to explain himself. I fear, though, that the damage is done, certainly to his political career. He might not resign today or tomorrow or next week. I don't think that he's going to be the public safety minister in the long term. And I just think, the comments really kind of undermined a key issue for the Liberals, for Liberal voters, and for Canadians writ large. I mean, the issue of crime, the issue of gun violence is rising steadily, certainly in major urban centers and certainly in the polls. It's become a major preoccupation of voters. And I just think that having a minister in this position, kind of unable to explain himself, having this audio leaked where he casts doubt on the logic of his government's own policy, kind of makes light of certain elements of it that might not make sense, and just from a communications perspective isn't really able to fully explain to the public the value of this policy proposal without saying that it's part of a larger package of other things that are coming and will move forward. I don't think this addresses a major preoccupation of the Canadian public right now, and so I don't think the minister is going to survive this long term. I'm not sure exactly what will happen to him. I think actually having the Conservatives calling for him to resign is a sure sign that he will not do so today. But I don't think that he is. I don't think that he is well positioned in this role to take it forward and address this issue that is certainly rising in the minds of Canadian voters.
We'll see what happens in that cabinet shuffle in the next little while, whenever that thing actually happens. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. Our front bench is sticking around. We're going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel coming back on air tonight next.
We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Well, Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he had bad ratings more than anything else, and he said a horrible thing about a great gentleman known as Charlie Kirk. And Jimmy Kimmel is not a talented person. He had very bad ratings, and they should have fired him a long time ago.
Meanwhile, in other ABC news, young Jimmy Kimmel's coming back to television. I tell you, Jimmy Kimmel's flying high like Advil today.
I'm so happy for them. Plus, now that Jimmy's not being canceled, I get to enjoy this again.
What a difference just under a week makes. After being yanked off airwaves for angering Donald Trump and Trump supporters, U.S. late-night host Jimmy Kimmel will be back on TV tonight. Disney, the parent company of ABC, which airs Kimmel's show, released a statement to that effect that reads in part, "We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." Let's bring back the front bench to talk about that. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stoner here. Larissa, I'll start with you. What does it say to you that the show is coming back, and what do you think the impetus is? I would point out that Sinclair and I think it's Nexstar, the two companies that own a bunch of affiliates, won't put it back on, but the Disney as a parent company decided to.
Yeah, and we talked about this on the radio earlier today. I'll start off by saying, as much as we criticize the mainstream media in Canada, I feel like most Canadians and most journalists and most pundits like us are just watching this in the States, so grateful that that's not us and that's not our reality. We saw when Donald Trump won, we saw all these companies really start sucking up to him, right? And really start towing that Trump line. And I think that that's what happened with this example. And I think that that was, Disney's point of view was like, what would Donald Trump want us to do? And you got to think about why, right? So there must be something else that Disney's asking the government for or asking Donald Trump's approval on, and they're trying to curry favor with him. And I think that they walked it back because the economics didn't make sense. We heard that Disney lost a lot of money since this ban. And just one more point to this, Donald Trump was saying like he disrespected a great man named Charlie Kirk. And I agreed with a lot of what Charlie Kirk said. The biggest thing Charlie Kirk would talk about is freedom of speech and honoring those people that you disagree with. And I think that this is actually flying in the face of what Charlie Kirk would have stood for.
Well, I think that points to, Laura, that there wasn't consensus on the right in the United States behind this move. There were, in fact, a lot of prominent Republicans, for example, like Ted Cruz, who were speaking out quite explicitly, in particular about the FCC bending to the president's whim.
Yes, I think that it's pressure from Republicans themselves that likely led to this decision. I think Ted Cruz likened the comments from the FCC chairman to a mob boss and just said, like, we should not be weighing into these battles. And I think they have the foresight to see that, when the pendulum swings back, they don't want this when the Democrats are in power, right? Again, which might happen unless Trump remains president forever. But, this is not something that the FCC should be weighing into. It went too far. So I think that had a lot to do with it. I think that, this whole debacle is probably going to be great for ratings. I would expect, Jimmy Kimmel's show to do wonders tonight. I think Sarah McLachlan's on as well as a musical guest. So there's obviously a Canadian connection always. But no, I think it was pressure, but I think with the affiliate channels, stepping back, the Nexstar and Sinclair shows that there's still business interests at play, right? Because Nexstar, I believe, is waiting for a merger approval as well. So I think this whole episode has, it sends a chill around free speech, around the line between entertainment and commentary. And I think Larissa is completely right that Canada is kind of watching with horror and thinking, this is not something that the government should ever be weighing into. And, hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Very curious to see, Kathleen, tonight how Jimmy Kimmel actually addresses it, how far he goes, because those two companies that own those affiliate stations had demanded a donation to the organization that Charlie Kirk founded, and then also a formal apology. That hasn't transpired. I think the only thing that he's posted is something on Instagram today, a picture of himself with Norman Lear, who was a target for Nixon at the time. That's it. What will you be watching?
And what's reported so far in places like the Hollywood Reporter is that he hasn't actually agreed to any kind of concession, any kind of real apology. So
how could he?
How could he? Exactly. So I mean, he's going to be taping his opening monologue momentarily, essentially, and so wait to see. But I think what's really problematic is that we have seen Trump time and time again use kind of regulatory pressure as a tool of political control, right? And he did that with the tech CEOs, as Larissa mentioned. We saw them all fall in line and start donating to his various campaigns and the inaugural balls at the very beginning, and he's continued that pressure. And what that really is something that's called anticipatory obedience. Corporate obedience to Trump is really terrifying. And I wouldn't say that we're immune to it in Canada, actually. It could drift up here as well. But I think, I guess on the happy note is that we also saw people power in this. We saw people protesting against ABC and Disney. We saw enormous cancellations in Hulu and Disney. In fact, Google search noted that it was an all-time high spike of people searching, how do I cancel my Disney account? And,
of course, none of us actually know how to. That's why our streaming
bills
are through the roof.
Kids do. My kids could figure that out, but I couldn't figure that out. There was actually a small hit to their bottom line, but I think that also remembering that people have power, right? And I think that's a lesson to take away from that. We saw actors, everyone from Meryl Streep to Robert De Niro kind of coming out and supporting, and that people power. So I hope we see more of that in the face of this corporate obedience that we see time and time again.
It's a great point to bring up because also it has felt like that has dissipated so severely under and it's corporate obedience. It's countries that capitulate on tariffs. It's and I'm not talking about us, but I'm talking about everyone outside of us and China largely. It is. You certainly have a sense this is a new reality that we live in. So this is the first time, I would argue, in months that we've seen any kind of opposition organize and fight back.
Yeah, I don't know what Jimmy Kimmel's going to say tonight, but I think the one thing I know for sure is that Donald Trump's probably given him the best ratings he's had in a very long time. This is going to be a response heard around the world. I think a lot of people are going to be tuning in with a lot of interest to see how he makes light of this situation, how he pokes fun at the president in this moment, and to your point, whether or not there's any sort of sense of humility in what he has to say today. I think that will be really interesting. Yeah. I hope not to see that, but we will see if that's something he brings into it. On your point on standing up, I think it's really interesting. We've seen a political experiment in this country that resonated with voters around pushing back and standing up to an assertive White House that is completely different than anything the world has ever experienced before. Leaders around the world are trying different approaches, but it seems to me that in Western democracies, where leaders are trying to roll over or trying to suck up to Donald Trump, it's not going over well for them with their voters, right? I mean, in democracies where you have to be responsible to your voters who expect you to stand up for your interest and stand up for your country, when leaders are failing to do that, their numbers tend to be plummeting. And I think if you look to the UK, Keir Starmer's gone through that, right? The kind of embarrassing show that was the state visit last week, his original invitation for Trump to come visit the king again, all that was kind of embarrassing. And I think voters are penalizing them for it, frankly, in a way that we haven't seen in this country.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think there's a debate over kind of the way that things are going here in that vein, but I do take your point that relative to those other leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I think the outcome of the federal election was a response on that. And I think the popularity the Prime Minister continues to see is a reaction to how voters see him dealing with this situation.
Fair point. Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the discussion. Dan Moulton, Larissa Waller, Kathleen Monk, and Laura Stone, our wonderful front bench. I want to turn to the UN, the General Assembly that's taking place there right now. We're getting a big pivot, actually, from Donald Trump on Ukraine, in particular Russia's war on Ukraine. Have a listen.
It's been a terrible war. It should have ended. And Russia should have stopped it. But they've been 3.5 years and they've gotten not so far. So we'll see what happens. But the other side can fight too. And they've proven that. Maybe it's it could be that Russia's a paper tiger.
Trump making those comments seated next to French President Emmanuel Macron, which followed an earlier social media post from the president in which he wrote, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, and after seeing the economic trouble it's causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form with time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO. The original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Just to put a finer point on it, Trump, in advance of putting out this statement, has always consistently conceded that Ukraine would need to give up some territory in any kind of peace arrangement with Russia. So this is a very significant departure. Whether it lasts, of course, will be a different question. I'm going to take a commercial break right here on Power Play. On the other end of that break, New Brunswick's Premier Susan Holt is in town. We'll speak with her in studio. Thanks.
Canadian leaders, business leaders, political leaders, economic leaders need to chart a new course. We should have been making changes 15 years ago, but the next best time is now. The United States will always be a crucial trade partner, but we need to find new markets for our products and new products for our markets.
As economic concerns persist about the impact of Donald Trump's trade war on Canada, Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem says this country waited too long to reduce its economic dependence on the U.S. and is now paying a price. Macklem was speaking to business leaders in Saskatchewan, just as New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt was here in Ottawa to meet with federal ministers, including U.S.-Canada Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc. Hi, Premier. Good to have you here in studio.
Hi, Vashti. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. I know that you met with a number of federal ministers today, and I actually wanted to start off on essentially the relationship between your province and the federal government, particularly where these major projects are concerned, because that first list has come out. Obviously, nothing from New Brunswick specifically on the list, not even on those kind of 5 like maybes below. Why is that?
Well, I think we have to raise the awareness of the team here in Ottawa about the projects and the opportunities that we offer to them in New Brunswick. And really, it's about retooling how we shape the projects, because some of them are really ready to go almost on their own, and figuring out how they fit into a major projects office structure or a trade corridors fund structure or a Build Canada Homes structure. That's what we're doing, is taking our opportunity and fitting it into the landscape that the federal government has put in front of us.
So was the pitch the problem?
I think a piece of it. You know, we have some projects that don't need a ton of acceleration of regulatory approval, and that's the main tool that the Major Projects Office is offering. And so demonstrating to them how our projects fit the criteria that is evolving. You know, we're learning as we look at these projects what they're actually going for. Are they looking for speed? Are they looking for achievability? What kind of private sector proponent and commitment is in the project? And making sure they have all the answers to those questions.
Did you not feel like you had that information in advance? Like out of for example, the First Minister's meeting, it seemed pretty explicit from the federal government that they were looking for things that were almost there, but not quite. Was that not clear to you?
I think it's been evolving, because if you look at the list of projects, you'll see in the first 5 some that are pretty much done deals. And then if you look at the next list, you'll see some that are real long shots. So trying to navigate when we're talking port projects and mineral projects. And
I mean, the first 5 were not long shots at all.
No, I mean, Darlington's done. I'm not quite sure what role the federal government is going to play in advancing that project. And so it's really trying to read from different ministers who have different perspectives. What are the goalposts? And more importantly, to tell them about what New Brunswick has to offer, because we are here to unlock an opportunity to export LNG to Europe. We're here to deliver a critical mineral for our defense interests in a way that positions us geopolitically the way that we need it to. We've got a port that has capacity and is delivering resources to the West, and so it is a critical piece of economic infrastructure that we want to link in to the growth plans that the nation has. And so it's just making sure that there's consistent awareness of the fact that we're ready to go. We have partners at the table, and we have some projects that could benefit from being designated that are going to help New Brunswickers and is going to help Canada.
Can I ask you to drill down just on when you mentioned LNG, because of course for years now it's been politically contentious to talk about shipping LNG to Europe. We interviewed the Speaker of the European Parliament here a few weeks ago, who was unequivocal. There is a market in Europe, she said, even at a higher price for Canadian LNG. Are there discussions that New Brunswick is involved in about being kind of the point of export, for example, for that product? And where would you tell Canadians those discussions are if they're happening?
That is exactly the discussion. If we want to compete in the European natural gas market, we've got to move fast. And so we don't have time to build a ton of new infrastructure. We have an existing LNG terminal in St. John that is ready to be used in the next few years to unlock our ability to sell natural gas to Europe. And so there's no other terminal that is in that position that is pointing east. So we just need about 600 kilometers of pipe to connect to that LNG terminal. Well, look at some of the previously proposed pipeline projects and the amount of kilometers and also the nature of those kilometers and whether they're going through tundra or whether they're going through really inaccessible land. This is a short piece of pipeline to attach to existing infrastructure that some of my neighbors want to see expanded in order to unlock our ability to maybe squeeze out the US, squeeze out Russia, and deliver to Europe the natural gas that they need that really improves Canada's economic and energy security and independence.
So you're a Liberal. The previous Prime Minister was a Liberal. He argued there was not a business case for that. Do you think there's a business case for it?
Oh, I think things have shifted. I think if you look at the relationships that Europe is interested in building and who they want to buy their energy and fuels from, they're a lot more wary about Russian sources. And right now, they're even wary about American sources of fuel because of the way that relationship's been going. So new developments in the Gulf Coast, new developments in the Gulf Coast, as well as other parts of the world, aren't as attractive as a stable democracy that Canada has to offer Europe as a reliable place to get that supply. Who is going to provide that resource to the fullest extent of environmental scrutiny and managing human rights and doing it safely and fairly?
Europe was already worried, though, about Russia when Prime Minister Trudeau said, and already trying to wean itself off, I should be clear, Russian gas, when the Prime Minister said that there wasn't a business case. Has it really evolved that much? And are you sure, can you tell New Brunswickers that there is a business case, that whatever investments are made on the part of the province will be recouped on a return?
Well, that's the conversation that we're having at the table right now with a number of private sector proponents, right? We have pipeline providers, we have infrastructure owners, we have a lot of people interested in looking at the marketplace today, the competitive factors, looking at the assets and the infrastructure that we have and the ability to create that new market for Western gas and get this critical piece of infrastructure built in the eastern part of the country.
A lot of this is, of course, a discussion that's happening, as you mentioned, with against the backdrop of what's happening with the United States. New Brunswick is the most exposed province to the relationship with the U.S. I note that as of your recent fiscal projections, the deficit has increased by $120 million versus what was projected in the March budget. How much worse are these tariffs going to make that, and what are you prepared to do as a result?
Well, we went through this with our first budget, right? We were sworn in November 2nd. The president came into power shortly thereafter, immediately threatened tariffs, and we watched our economic projections tank because the investment climate was too uncertain and people froze projects to hire or invest in new capacity. And it hasn't gotten prettier since then because we've seen some of the customer relationships that we have with the U.S. be challenged, the additional burden of the steel and aluminum tariffs, now the increased softwood lumber tariffs, they're hammering New Brunswick's economy. And so we had put together a $150 million fund to support companies impacted by tariffs this past spring in February and March to help them deal with that threat. And now we're looking at projections that are even more serious at a time when we want to make sure that economic activity in New Brunswick is there to produce the kind of good paying jobs that New Brunswickers need in order to pay their ever rising bills. It's a really tough circle to square, and we need to balance our ability to be fiscally responsible, to manage our debt as responsibly as we can, while investing in the kind of conditions that are going to deliver the jobs for New Brunswickers and manage the costs of living that they're facing right now.
To be clear, though, like part of the increase in the projection for the deficit, the size of the deficit, is because of increased spending and obviously lower revenues. If those revenues continue to be depleted by the situation, through the situation, at least, you know, in part with the United States, are you going to cut spending more? Are you going to increase taxes? Or are you going to tell New Brunswickers to live with a bigger deficit and no promise of balancing the budget, which is what you did promise to do during the election?
Yeah, we have looked at a lot of different ways to make this work, and we're actually undergoing a bit of an activity right now in government. It's the work of civil servants to find new ways to deliver a program, right? Do we need to be doing that work? Do we need to be doing it now? Do we need to be doing it this way? We started that a year ago. Finding those savings within the first 12 months while you're trying to execute the transformation is challenging, but that's inside baseball. What New Brunswickers want is to know that they can have affordable power. They want to have an affordable place to live. So we're doing property tax reform right now. We're doing a comprehensive review of our energy utility. We're looking at the things that will help deliver affordability for New Brunswickers. And then inside, we're making sure that we're investing in their number one priority, which is the healthcare system. We've got to make sure that New Brunswickers have access to healthcare, and those investments in primary care will actually save us money in tertiary care and acute care, the most expensive form of care, right? If you can move somebody from getting their senior or long-term care in the hospital into a home care environment, there's a significant cost savings there, and that's a process and a labor challenge. So there's a whole bunch of areas where I think we could deliver better services to New Brunswickers at lower cost, while we make sure that our economic engine has the fuel that it needs to deliver the revenues both to New Brunswickers and to our province.
I guess and I take your point on all of that, and I understand that those kinds of endeavors, they don't turn around results overnight. They certainly haven't over the last year. So my question again, are you prepared to further cut spending in a meaningful way to address a ballooning deficit? Will you raise taxes, or will you tell New Brunswickers to just live with a bigger deficit than you promised?
Yeah, well, we've already asked them to live with a bigger deficit than we promised, right? The expectation coming into the last election was an economic trajectory that looks very different than the one that we're on now. So we have delivered a deficit in our first budget and projections for deficits in the next 3 years, because to meet that promise, we would have to break every other promise that we've made. And New Brunswickers are expecting us to help them look after their debt and their deficits, as well as balancing our own. We don't have an eye on new taxes right now. We think there are ways that we can find savings in the civil service and invest in transforming how we deliver those services. So closer to the customer, engaging our partners in the nonprofit and the municipal sectors to do things differently, thinking about how we deploy technology better so that we can reach those beautiful far corners of New Brunswick where people want to live in peace in the woods close to the water without all of the noise of an urban center, and give them the services they need in a different way, so we can save money and we can still manage our deficit responsibly while improving services affordably to New Brunswickers.
I'm going to leave it on that note. I've run out of time, but thank you very much, Premier, for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
New Brunswick's Premier Susan Holt. We're back in just a moment. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to field questions from reporters at the UN General Assembly a little bit later on this hour. We'll have full coverage right here on CTV News Channel. I'm Vashti Capellos. I'll leave Power Play there. Have a great night.